It's Paul, SouthP24 from Instagram and YouTube. Thanks for tuning in. Once again, I'm back with another custom figure tutorial. And once again, it's another Boba Fett. This time I'm going to be showing you how I built this figure. He is a 6-inch soft goods 1/12 scale Boba Fett as he appears in The Empire Strikes Back. Should come as no surprise, Boba Fett's one of my favorite Star Wars characters, so I keep kind of going back to him for my projects and wanting to make the ultimate version. My goal really is always to try and go for something that's at a Mezco level with the soft goods. If you've watched some of my other tutorials, it's going to be a very similar build to this one, which was the Book of Boba Fett style. So I'm using some similar techniques. Of course, the parts that go into it are a little bit different. I'm calling them a Mezco style, but you might have noticed that a lot of the helmet, jetpack, and the armor were actually sourced from the MAFEX Fett. And I really feel it's probably the best 6-inch scale Fett that you can find off the shelf. But I was lucky. I got one that was kind of cheaper because it had some broken parts. If you can source one that way, go for it, and you can kind of follow my explanation or my instructions step for step. But really the principles are the same whether you go with a MAFEX or maybe you have some nice 3D printed parts. There's a lot of amazing designers out there doing some wonderful work. So you can source everything just 3D printed, or perhaps you can take something from the Hasbro Return of the Jedi version. It's really, in my opinion, a fantastic Black Series figure, maybe one of my favorites. Or everyone's got this guy lying around. For me, he's definitely going to be retired off of the shelf at this point. It's feeling rather dated, the original Empire Black Series version, but you could still take a lot of the gauntlets and armor pieces from him. So you have some flexibility. We'll walk through how I did it using the MAFEX pieces. I'll show you what goes into the base body, underneath the soft goods, where I got the soft goods from, the minor modifications I had to make to have them all kind of work and get the colors right, which are still not perfect, but I'm happy with where I'm at. So yeah, let's get into it. For base figures, I'm using the Drawman 112. It's got fantastic articulation, and of course the MAFEX Fett, which I mentioned off the top. If you don't have that, you can use a Black Series, a lot of good donor parts there. You can also use the Bandai Model Kit, which I used for my previous Book of Boba Fett figure. For soft goods, GPSlot from eBay is fantastic. You get this great jumpsuit, which in combination with that long sleeve t-shirt is really all you need to make this work. I was also able to get this Return of the Jedi version of Boba Fett's belt. I don't recommend the source I got it from because it just took way too long, over 2 years, and in the end, I did need to modify it for that Empire Strikes Back look anyhow. So whether you're using MAFEX, Black Series, Model Kit, you've got it all disassembled, you're gonna have to do a little bit of dremeling, which is really just to remove that material behind the armor pieces to make sure that it sits flat against the base figure. So that just means going slowly, be careful not to ding the front, and always check to see that it's fitting nicely against the body. I'm not much of a sewer, so I'm always on the lookout for 1/12 scale clothes that could be suitable for my projects, knowing that you can just paint the fabric. And that's what I did in this case. I used a combination of a silver gray, a black, and a blue, just to try and dial in that Empire Boba color. All Mandalorians kind of have this layered look with the sleeves coming through the flight suit. So to do that, I'm snipping the long sleeves off the shirt. I'm going to put those just up the arms and keep them in place with a small dab of glue. Then I'll have those showing through the rest of the jumpsuit. And it gives the impression that there's an undershirt, but without adding the bulk. I'll come back to the rest of the vest in a second. I just wanted to show here that if you use the MAFEX parts, both the feet and the wrist braces actually fit perfectly onto the Drawman pegs. So the feet fit with full articulation, and then it's the same thing with the wrist braces, which fit right into the forearm peg. It's a tight fit, so you lose some of the swivel articulation, but it means you don't have to Dremel it out and then permanently glue it. Okay, coming back to that vest, you can see I've cleaned it up with the sleeves and I've put a little bit of a slit up the back. And the reason I do that is to make sure I can get it as tight as possible to his chest so it's not all loose and baggy. Of course, it also means you have to sew it up the back. And in this case, I did a horrible job, but it doesn't really matter because it's going to be covered by his back armor plate. You'll notice I also put a piece of metal in that back plate, and that's going to be used to hold the jetpack in place with a magnet. For the armor parts, everything gets glued directly to that sleeveless vest, so the back, the shoulders, and the chest. In this case, with the chest, you can see I'm gluing it down as one solid piece, and that has its pros and cons. If you were using the Bandai Model Kit or 3D printed parts, they'd be individual, and I think that might give a little bit more articulation in the torso. But as you can see, really, I've maintained all full range of motion. The armor's not really getting in the way of anything, and the same with the jumpsuit. So I'm happy with this, and we're ready to move on to the next step. All right, moving down to Boba Fett's legs, and he's got a lot going on in his legs. First up are those little shin pouches where he's got some tools and knives or whatever it is. So I've made, out of little scraps of material, I've made some pockets. I glue the little plastic pieces to the back of the pocket, and then I'll glue those onto the pants at the shins. For the cargo pockets on his thighs, it took me a little bit of trial and error to get it to look right. I think what's most important is that the fabrics match, but ultimately you're just cutting a little triangle, gluing that over a rectangle, and then putting that directly onto the pants. You can always fix the color after with some paint. For the knee pads, you have a couple of different options. You can really glue those directly to the jumpsuit, which is totally fine. I've just chosen to first add a small elastic band that will be free from the pants, and then I glue the knee pads to that. It just gives you a little extra flexibility in how it's going to sit. So here are the legs all coming together. I didn't talk about the belt because, like I said, I got it from another source, but really with just kind of mirroring the same concept of making pouches in a strip of leather, you can kind of do the same thing. Really the last check is make sure articulation's good. And of course, we'll need to go over those pockets and pouches with a small touch of paint. Like I said, my combination was a silver, gray, black, and a blue. Last few steps, we've got the Wookie braids, of course. So I just cut a small slit, run that over the shoulder, and just keep it in place with a very small dab of glue on the shoulder armor so it doesn't move around. And lastly, the cape. This one came from Ironheart Customs. It's a wired cape. Installing it with just a small amount of glue on the shoulder armor. I'll leave the link down below for Ironheart Customs. Be sure to check them out on Instagram. Just fantastic quality products. Is so much so that I actually delayed the end of this project just until I had this cape in hand because I felt it was so important to add that level of realism and dynamic posing. But you know what? Whether you're doing this for a custom project like this or just to upgrade your Black Series figures, I really recommend checking them out. But for now, I'm calling this project done. If you've made it this far, thanks so much for sticking with the tutorial. I hope it was useful. If you have questions, be sure to leave those down below, or you can find me on Instagram at SouthP24. I always love sharing ideas and hearing what kind of projects you're working on. For me, this is one of those personal projects I really kind of put everything into, so hope you appreciated the video, and thanks again for sticking with it, and I'll see you next time.